March 1st, 1953. Moscow is silent under a thick layer of snow. Inside a heavily guarded villa on the outskirts of the city, one of the most powerful and feared men on earth lies dying on the carpet of his private study, alone, unseen, unhelped. No one dares to knock, no one dares to enter, because the man behind that door is Joseph Stalin. Welcome back to Fleek of History, where we deep dive into the moments that changed our world forever. If you want to explore how the most powerful figures in history met their downfall, hit that subscribe button right now and join the community of truth hunters who never stop questioning power. Because tonight, we uncover how one of the most terrifying dictators of the 20th century, the man who ruled through fear, propaganda, and blood, met his end in sheer humiliation. This is the brutal final 24 hours of Joseph Stalin. The dictator's final dinner. It all began on the night of February 28, 1953. Stalin, then 74, invited his closest allies to his country retreat, the Kuntsevo dacha. From the outside, it looked simple, just another Soviet estate among countless others. But inside it was a fortress, security checkpoints, secret microphones, armed guards, and walls that bore witness to whispered fears. His dinner guests that night were the architects of Soviet power, Lavrentiy Beria, the icy-eyed head of the secret police, Georgy Malenkov, Stalin's quiet right-hand bureaucrat, and Nikolai Bulganin, the loyal industrial administrator, and Nikita Khrushchev, a shrewd political survivor with a farmer's face and a ruthless heart. Every smile at that table hid suspicion. Every toast concealed terror. In Stalin's world, loyalty was a survival performance, and everyone knew that one wrong gesture could mean exile, or worse. They dined late, as usual. Wine flowed. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and paranoia. Stalin laughed hard that night, reminiscing about purged generals and long-dead rivals. To his guests, laughter was as dangerous as silence, because no one ever knew when a joke might turn into a test. They played their parts well. But history was already closing in. The morning stillness. When the dinner finally ended around 4 a.m., the guests hurried out, relieved to be alive another day. Stalin's guards locked the heavy gates behind them. Inside, the dictator retired to his private study. It was the last time anyone would see him conscious. By sunrise, the dacha fell into its usual eerie silence. The staff, cooks, guards, secretaries had learned to walk on eggshells. Stalin's orders were clear. No one was to disturb him ever. Even waking him early had once cost a servant his life. That morning, his staff obeyed tradition, terrified to do anything else. The hours ticked by. Noon passed. Then afternoon. Still no movement from the study. The guards whispered. The housekeeper crossed herself in secret. The chief valet, a loyal man named Krustalev, paced outside Stalin's door, torn between obedience and fear. Inside, the most powerful man in the Soviet Union was fighting for his life, alone. He had suffered a massive stroke sometime that night. Unable to move or call for help, he lay in his own bodily fluids for hours, half-conscious, suffocating in the silence he had built around himself. The moment of discovery. It wasn't until nearly 7 p.m., almost an entire day later, that the desperate valet finally opened the door. The scene was horrific. Stalin lay on the floor, face down, his right arm twisted, his breathing shallow and broken. Papers were scattered around him, a chair overturned. His face was flushed, his uniform soaked, his once feared eyes unfocused. The man who had commanded millions now couldn't even lift himself from the ground, but still the guards froze. Years of fear had trained them to do nothing without permission, even if their leader was dying. It's one of the darkest things about totalitarianism. It destroys initiative. Even compassion itself. The waiting game. When the guard finally reported the incident, the command chain started, slowly. First the security chief. Then, after more hesitation, Lavrentiy Beria and Georgy Malenkov. They arrived late that night, stepping through the echoes of silence where the masters of terror once laughed. Beria, the man who had overseen Stalin's purges and mass executions, stood over his collapsing leader. To him, Stalin's helplessness wasn't a tragedy. It was an opportunity. Witnesses would later claim he smiled. They whispered near the fallen dictator, debating, should they call a doctor? Should they move him? Should they? Simply wait? Every decision was political. Helping Stalin could save his life or destroy theirs if he woke up vindictive. Letting him die could free them all, but only if they played it right, so they waited for hours. The doctors fear by the following morning, Stalin was still breathing, but barely. His body was cold, his pulse faint. Finally, late on March 2nd, nearly a full day after his collapse, Beria authorized medical help. But even that decision came wrapped in paranoia. Just months before, Stalin had imprisoned or executed dozens of the Soviet Union's best doctors for allegedly plotting to kill high-ranking officials. It was called the Doctor's Plot, another paranoid fantasy that had terrorized the medical community. Now, when Stalin himself needed help, there was almost no one left to call. The surviving doctors were terrified. If their treatment failed, they could be accused of sabotage. If Stalin woke up dissatisfied, they could be executed. It was a lose-lose situation designed by the man they were supposed to save. Doctors arrived and found him barely alive, his breathing labored, one side of his body paralyzed. They took notes carefully, as if every word would be used in court. They hesitated to give medicine, terrified it could be the wrong kind. In the heart of the world's second most powerful nation, its most feared man was dying not from lack of science, but from the fear he had forged into every soul around him. The silent power struggle. While Stalin's body weakened, the vultures circled. In the adjoining rooms, his 4 deputies quietly started dividing the empire. Beria wanted control of state security. Malenkov aimed for administrative power. Khrushchev, underestimated but patient, began taking careful notes. As the dictator lay gasping, his lifelong game of paranoia continued. Only now he was the silence in the middle of it. His own lieutenants whispered over his twitching body, shaping the future of the Soviet Union in low voices. Each was deciding who lived, who died, and who would rule next. By March 3rd, they had turned Stalin's deathbed into a political chessboard. No one wept. No one prayed. They just planned. The death of the Iron Man. For 3 long days, Stalin lingered between life and death. His doctors kept vigil while his comrades argued about succession. The thick scent of tobacco and fear filled the air. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering everything in freezing silence. On March 5th, 1953, at precisely 9:50 p.m., Joseph Stalin took his last breath. No crowds. No fanfare. Only a room full of men who couldn't look each other in the eye. The death was recorded clinically. The guards exhaled. The doctors stepped back. And Beria, ever the opportunist, immediately began giving orders. Lock down the dacha, seal the news, control the narrative. Within hours, the propaganda machine rolled out the official version. Comrade Stalin, the beloved leader, had died peacefully after a brief illness, surrounded by loyal comrades and the love of the Soviet people. The truth, of course, was that he had died in agony and filth, ignored by men too terrified to help him. The funeral of fear, the Soviet Union erupted in orchestrated mourning. Millions wept, many sincerely. Others cried because cameras were watching. Crowds filled Red Square, holding portraits of Stalin, fainting from exhaustion and grief. Several were crushed to death in the stampede, an eerie final chapter of destruction in his name. Behind the scenes, the power struggle accelerated. Beria initially controlled the situation, directing the funeral, speeches, and broadcasts. His face appeared calm, even sympathetic, but every move was strategic. He expected to inherit the empire. He didn't. Within months, Nikita Khrushchev and Malenkov turned the tables. They accused Beria of treason, had him arrested and later executed. The same swift justice he had once delivered to millions. The revolution had devoured yet another of its children. Devoured yet another of its children. The legacy he left behind Stalin's death didn't end his terror. It only exposed it. The system he built couldn't vanish. Overnight, prisons were still full, people still disappeared. Those who had survived his purges still whispered when they spoke his name, but his passing cracked the spell. For the first time in decades, people began to breathe. Khrushchev, now leader, would eventually denounce Stalin's crimes in a secret speech, revealing to party members the vast machinery of fear their beloved father had created. But even then, the truth was only half told. Filtered through politics and self-preservation, To this day, historians argue whether Stalin's death was natural or whether those close to him let him die intentionally. In the world he built, the line between fate and betrayal was razor thin. But one fact remains. The man who once decided who lived or died was himself abandoned by the very system he created. That was the true punishment, the human end of a monster in the end. Stalin didn't die as a god or a soldier. He died as a lonely old man drowning in fear, the same fear he had fed the world for 30 brutal years. His heart failed, his empire faltered, and his so-called friends stepped over his body to reach for power. History loves irony, and there is no irony greater than this. The architect of terror being destroyed by terror itself. Call to action. If this story shook you, share it, because remembering moments like these means refusing to repeat them. This was Fleek of History, where we dig into the untold truths behind humanity's darkest hours. Subscribe now to uncover more shocking endings, twisted politics and forgotten lives that shape the world you live in today. New episodes drop every week, and trust me, the next one will make your skin crawl. History isn't just in the past, it's the mirror we're too afraid to look into. So, look closer.